Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda.
And we're your hosts.
We're a traveling couple and digital nomads taking you on our adventures as we explore locations, destinations, and careers.
Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast. Thanks again for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about a couple of recent trips, as well as some life updates and show updates for the upcoming few months. So with that in mind, let's jump into it.
Yeah, where do you want to start?
So yeah, when was the last time we had kind of an update podcast?
I think the last kind of life update podcast would have been our year in review, but I mean, that was more like a year in review than a life update. But we kind of didn't really tell people what we were doing in 2024.
Yeah, so the last bit we've had interviews, and before that we talked about Argentina. Argentina was our last trip in 2023. And then at the start of this year, we took a family trip to Hawaii. Yeah,
so fun fact, your parents like to go to Maui every January. And this year they invited us to come along and see them because it'd been a number of months since they had seen Lou and since they'd seen us. And I mean, we live in Mexico, so winter is not like the winter that we think about when it comes to Canada and being Canadian and being from, the north and stuff like that. But it gets a little chilly here in Querétaro, and we don't have central heating or anything like that. So we were like, yeah, a nice warm beach trip in January sounds awesome. We're definitely down for that. And it's been a number of years since either of us have been to Hawaii. I haven't been since 2015, and it's been more time for you, right? Like 2010. Yeah, 2010 we went together with your family, and I mean, it's really been like a family destination. I think I've been a couple times with my family. I've been now a couple times with your family. And then I did go for a yoga festival, which is when I went in 2015. But yeah, I wasn't really sure what to expect kind of just post-pandemic Hawaii, and then also going to Maui after the big fires that happened in Lahaina last year. I wasn't really sure what things were going to be like. But maybe before we get to that, we can talk a little bit about the sort of epic travels to get there. Because while Hawaii is a fantastic destination when you're in Western Canada or, the Pacific Northwest, Western US, which is where a lot of the tourists do come from, it's pretty far from where we live.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising when we went to go. We were like, okay, yeah, we'll come. And then we went and looked at flights. And there's no flights from the country of Mexico to Hawaii, which I found to be quite surprising that there's no direct flights. You either have to go to like the mainland U.S., LA, Dallas, etc., or you could go to Canada. That would make absolutely no sense, though. So all in all, it ended up being a very long flight to go from here to Mexico City to LA to Hawaii, and then do all of that in reverse. On the way back, I think it ended up taking substantially longer than it took us to get to Japan.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy to think about since, obviously Hawaii's, it's far out there. Like when you look on a map, it's like quite west, and you go back, what did we go back? Like 3 hours of time?
I think so.
So it's like a significant time change as well. But you think like, oh, we're just going to some, beautiful tropical islands in the US. It shouldn't be that far from Mexico. But yeah, definitely a haul to get there. But I would say, I feel like it was worth it.
Yeah, really, really solid. Yeah, not a terrible long time in terms of flights, just with all the layovers along the way. But yeah, we were there 2 weeks. I took some time off work and then did a bit of remote work from there. And we stayed in Maui near Wailea, which is kind of the southwest part of the island. So pretty far away from where the main thrust and damage from the Maui fires was. And yeah, just a really beautiful, perfect weather, super calm, like everything you could want out of a Hawaiian trip.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like we've mentioned, it's been quite a while since either of us have been there, and we haven't really been super interested in going to Hawaii because I don't really think that it's good value for your dollar. It's quite expensive to go there, especially in terms of accommodation and food, or at least that's what I was thinking kind of prior to this trip. But and it is quite expensive, which we can talk about. But I feel like going there, I was like, oh, I'm reminded of, every time I've been there before, I've really enjoyed it and all that type of stuff. And I really understand, why people go there. Because I think that as much as Mexico and Mexican beach destinations are great, and I think that they're way better, like bang for your buck, there's something about Hawaii that's just way more like peaceful, tranquil. Like Mexico always has a little bit of chaos going on, I think.
Yeah, I think in Hawaii too, you probably get maybe a bit more of that in like Honolulu and on Oahu, but especially in Maui, it felt like everywhere you went was like just still a decent amount of people there, but things are nice, things are clean, the roads are nice, people are nice, everything's just like really kind of chill and good and high quality.
Well taken care of, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, so I think like it's hard to say about value for money because I do think there's very little like it. I don't know, maybe a place like Fiji, in terms of like just beautiful, pristine, tropical, but not too hot. Especially that time of year, it was just like perfect.
Yeah, we had really, really great weather while we were there. And while we don't live in Canada, as you guys know, Canada had like an insane polar vortex while it happened. And there were so many Canadians talking about how cold it was. And, my parents were at home messaging and talking to friends and stuff. And I was like, oh, it feels really nice to be in this warm space and this nice tropical weather. So maybe we can talk just a little bit about some of the highlights of what we did. So for anyone who's maybe looking to plan a trip to Maui, we could just share some of the things that we did while we were there. Because I feel like we had a really good balance of like some just really chill days going either down to the beach or going to the pool with Lou or just, walking around. And then we also did some like fun adventure stuff. Yeah.
So obviously, Maui is relatively small, so there's not like a ton of different areas. There's like the Kanapali's kind of seems to be like where a number of resorts are. That's a big area. Lahaina was obviously massively affected by the fires. Kihei and then Wailea seem to be like the main areas. And then there's like lots of smaller towns and different spots kind of on the other side of the island or like even further north. But those seem to be kind of like the main places where you'd look at to stay. We stayed in Wailea, which was really nice. Probably a little bit on the expensive side, but I mean, everywhere in Maui is on the expensive side. Rented a car, which I think was really good and actually relatively affordable. I think we might have gotten in at a moment where you couldn't really plan for this, but the rental cars were really affordable, I think, because lots of people probably had planned to come and then cancel the trip in the aftermath of the fires there. But having a rental car was super nice to be able to drive around. We drove up the volcano. We drove up to near where the PGA tournament was. We drove over to like where the Jaws waves are and the name of that town.
It's like Pai. Somebody's cringing. I'm so sorry.
And just kind of got all over the island, which is really fun.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like one of the highlights was going up to the volcano, and I think you had not been there before, but
I've been there before.
Okay, we'd both been there before. But it was fun to take Lou up there. Obviously, she's still really small. At the time, she was just a little bit under 2. But she was talking about how cold it was at the top, and she was like pointing at all the birds that are up there and just enjoying the view, and it's quite windy from the top. So I feel like it was fun to go up there with her. We had a pretty like fun trip, and it's really interesting because Maui is like, I guess, kind of mountainous, but also kind of flat. You see kind of just these significant like mountains sticking up, but Haleakala doesn't strike you as like, hey, we're going up pretty significantly, but then you go up and you're like, oh wow, we've gotten quite high. It had that sort of effect, for us. And I feel like that was definitely a highlight. And then, yeah, just going and exploring different areas was really nice. We kind of would pick an area and an activity to do and drive out there and walk around or have a meal or whatever. And I feel like it's just like everything is just, like you said, nice, well kept, taken care of. Weather was great, like we said. And I feel like it was just just like a nice reminder of, okay, this is like a great vacation destination. And I also think going there with a kid was nice. I think it's a really good family spot.
Yeah, for sure. And the only downside, like you mentioned at the start, was the cost of things. I ran into a number of things that were the same amount in dollars as they were in pesos in Mexico, whether it's drinks or entrees at restaurants, tennis lessons, things like that. So things are quite expensive. It seems like really maybe, I don't know the dynamics between the islands, but maybe things will start to like even off a little bit as kind of this idea of like Hawaii's super expensive. It's really hard to do things because there isn't much staff. Everything costs so much money. And maybe there'll start to be like more opportunities to find better value on trips there. But you can certainly see why so many people want to be in Hawaii.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like it's kind of like basic economics, like supply and demand, right? But yeah, it is kind of crazy, some of the prices. And I think obviously with inflation that's happening, it's impacting, the prices as well. But we went to a sushi restaurant that was nice, but I wouldn't say it's like the most high-end place I've ever been. They had, no joke, a couple of rolls on the menu that were like 45 to 50 USD. And so I was like, this must be like a family size roll. Like, how else could this cost this much? And so I asked the girl how many pieces, and she's like, yeah, it's like 8 big pieces. I was like, what? That's like actually wild to me. And I'm sure it's like, really tasty and it's probably great fish and stuff. But I was just like, I feel like just having fish tacos for, like $25 was kind of a little bit of a shock to the system coming from Mexico. And Mexico has also gone through like inflation and price increases over the last couple of years too. So I feel like that is like saying a lot, but I think it's just going in with the expectation that, you're paying quite a bit for accommodation and you're paying quite a bit for your food. If you're eating out at restaurants, groceries are going to be like pretty standard, but like you said, rental car was pretty affordable. Gas, not particularly affordable, but our rental car went pretty far on gas, which was great. We got good gas mileage and stuff. And then you can do lots of things like once you're in your accommodation, like going to the pool doesn't cost extra money, and like going to the beach is free and stuff like that. So there is lots of stuff that you can kind of do, especially with a small child, that doesn't cost a bunch of money.
Yeah. And so that was in January. And then in start of March, we went to Cabo San Lucas, San Jose del Cabo, here in Mexico. We'd never been to Baja California, south or north, before, so it was our first time over there. We spent some time with your family at one resort and then moved to a different hotel for a few days before we went home, both kind of in the space in between Cabo San Lucas and San Jose del Cabo. For anyone who doesn't know, Cabo San Lucas kind of has like, that's what that area ends up being called. The main airport's actually in San Jose del Cabo. The majority of the resorts, I'd say, are in between the two. And then Cabo San Lucas is a bit more of like what would have been a maybe smaller place in the start, more bars, partying, and has a marina.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting vibe going there because the demographic that Cabo attracts is very diverse. There's a lot of young people that go there. It's super easy and affordable to get to from a lot of destinations in the US and in Canada. In fact, it took my parents less time to get there from Western Canada than it took us to get there from Querétaro because unfortunately we couldn't get direct flights. Flight time would have been less. Could we have done that? But we had to go through Mexico City. So they got there quicker than us, which is just pretty crazy, but it just shows you like how much demand there is for that. And so I felt like we kind of explored a little bit San Jose del Cabo and then Cabo San Lucas. And then we stayed both times kind of sort of in the middle. And it seems like if you are on the younger side If you're looking more for like, a girls trip or a guys trip or a couples trip or a party trip or something like that, Cabo San Lucas is definitely the place. That's where like the Senior Frogs is, other bars that are like that. Walking through there, it just feels a little bit like, I guess like a little more grungy, a little less like family friendly, that type of thing, versus San Jose del Cabo feels like just a little bit better cared for, a little safer, more family friendly, stuff like that. And there's lots more in that area that I would love to explore. And I kind of feel like for me, Cabo San Lucas is like, I'm good, at least in this chapter of life. But in between, so driving in between probably takes about an hour, and just you're driving along the coast, and just the coast is just like peppered with, condos, resorts, hotels, every type of accommodation that you could imagine there, golf courses, all this type of stuff. And so there's lots of variety, and it's really beautiful. I wasn't really sure what to expect of the area. And in general, we kind of prefer, the more untouched areas of Mexico, the more kind of, I guess, like authentic areas that aren't as touristic. But I definitely get the appeal just with like one, climate, and two, like the landscape. It's stunning there.
Yeah, and so because it's by the kind of northern part, well, not that northern, but you're in the Pacific Ocean, so the water's colder, which kind of helps moderate the temperatures. But it's very like almost desert-like on land, so a lot of cactuses, a lot of dry stuff. Doesn't rain much, and so when we were there in March, we got kind of mid-20s during the day, high teens at night, which was really wonderful. Because it's kind of a touristic place, there's a lot of like activities and things to do. Go quadding, go tequila tasting, go horseback riding, et cetera, et cetera. So tons of that type of stuff to do, but also just a good place to like hang out by the beach and have a few drinks. It seems like depending on the exact like placement of the beach a hotel is on, that some are better for swimming than others. Like obviously Baja has a reputation as being a great surf spot. The first beach we were on, really big waves. We didn't go swimming at all there. The second beach we were on was a little bit better, but the waves were still pretty intense. So something worth, if you're planning a trip there and you're like, oh, I'd really love to swim in the ocean. Obviously these places have wonderful, extraordinary, extensive pools. But if you want to swim in the ocean, to put some research into there. And then if you were going to Airbnb, I don't know. I think probably San Jose del Cabo is where I'd look, and there must be some cool beaches out there. But especially if you were Airbnb, I think you'd want for sure to have a rental car to be able to like go out, explore, get to some beaches, that type of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And we ended up getting a rental car for a trip. I don't think we necessarily needed one. We could have done like hotel transfers and stuff, but the place we rented for a week with my parents, we decided to not do all inclusive. We decided to have like a 2-bedroom sort of, I guess, condo or villa within the hotel that we were staying at. So we could do a little bit of like cooking and our own snacks and stuff. And so we wanted to have a car to be able to like grocery shop and maybe go off the resort and eat and explore a little bit. And I really liked that because we were really easily able to get to San Jose del Cabo, to Cabo San Lucas. We also took a day trip up to Todos Santos, which is a Pueblo, Mexico. Probably about an hour. It was about an hour from where we were staying, maybe a little less from Cabo San Lucas. Still on the coast, really popular for surfing. And I felt like I was really happy that we were able to like, kind of one day at the resort, just chilling, going to the pool, hanging out. Next day, do a little activity, something like that to explore. And we did do like kind of a boat trip to go see like the arches, which are in Cabo San Lucas. I feel like the particular boat trip we took, I wouldn't do again, but I really like the idea of like going out there, and there's so many options in terms of like glass bottom boats and snorkeling and et cetera, et cetera. We were just trying to figure out something that would work for us, especially with having a toddler. So yeah, I think what we did was fine, and the arches are really worth it to go see, I think, for me at least.
Yeah, and so we've been to Playa del Carmen, we've been to Tulum, we've been to Puerto Vallarta, we've now been to Cabo. Haven't really done Cancun that much. I think it's Mazatlan might be the other kind of like
Acapulco, Puerto Escondido.
Acapulco and Puerto Escondido. So I've been to many different beach towns and cities in Mexico. I think like Cabo stacks up really well, especially climate-wise. Climate was amazing. The things that kind of I noticed, especially compared to Puerto Vallarta, were prices being quite high. I'm sure this would really depend on your situation, but if you were thinking like, hey, I want an Airbnb and kind of not be at a resort and maybe do a slightly more affordable trip, I think that would be a nicer trip to do in Puerto Vallarta, just because Cabo feels like a place you want to be in a hotel or a resort, and then you're going to pay hotel and resort prices. Obviously, the same thing can happen in Puerto Vallarta, but Puerto Vallarta just has, the Zona Romantica and feels kind of more of like a city right there on the ocean that you can enjoy and be, a part of just by having an Airbnb.
Yeah, for sure. I think it definitely felt, I feel like I really liked Cabo, but I feel like it felt a little more like California to me than it felt like Mexico, just based on like some of the other destinations we've been to. And like, there is lots of tourism and English speaking and stuff like that in many of the places that we just listed, particularly like Playa del Carmen, Tulum, Puerto Vallarta, that type of thing. And so, I wasn't turned off by that or not expecting that. But I think just having everything be very westernized, even the second hotel we stayed at, like all the prices were like listed in US dollars. I'm just like, where are we? It's just like very, very strange. And on top of that, it's very expensive. So we went to this coffee shop that was in our hotel, and they had like a latte, for example, listed at like 10 USD, which, I mean, maybe that's like on par for California these days. But let me tell you, that is a very expensive latte in Mexico. I was like, what? So just, yeah, kind of like an interesting cultural vibe in that way. But one of the nights when we were on our own, we went, not far from our hotel. I think we only drove like 5 minutes maybe, and went to this like really cool plaza that had a bunch of restaurants, and we got some delicious food there. And I felt like, people were speaking Spanish and everything was in pesos, and the prices were, I think on par with probably any other beach town, and even Mexico City, which has high prices. And it felt much more like, okay, like this is like Mexico, and the resorts are more like westernized because they're catering to Americans and Canadians that are coming here.
Yeah. So overall, really enjoyed Cabo. Definitely see myself going back, especially that time of year. Like, I know March in Puerto Vallarta is starting to get pretty hot. Obviously Cancun, that neck of the woods, is always really hot. So some beautiful weather, really great ease of access from so many different places. I think for my like Mexico touristy beach town rankings, it's high, but Puerto Vallarta is going to be still on the top.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if we were to go back, I would love the idea of like exploring somewhere that's a bit more like away from the resorts, like maybe going and staying in Todos Santos, or maybe going to La Paz, which we didn't get a chance to go to. There's lots of like cool little towns kind of around there that you just have to go a little further for. And I think that I could really see that meeting like kind of all of our needs, where it's like a little bit more cost effective. We could still have kind of a more Mexican experience, still very safe. Climate is still great, all that type of thing. So I could definitely see us going back and maybe going to one of those smaller towns, as opposed to like staying kind of right in that main tourist area in like a bigger resort.
Yeah, for sure. If you have any specific questions though about planning a beach trip in Mexico, or Cabo specifically, though, feel free to reach out on social media, send us a message. We can answer any questions and give any tips, which leads us into the final thing for today's little mini episode, which is some personal news.
Yeah. What's up? What's up with us?
So we are awaiting the arrival of another member of our family. We have a baby coming in June-ish time range. And yeah, she will be a girl and will be the fourth member of our family.
Yeah. So we've had I think we were a little secretive about our plans at the end of, at our year in review episode. And the reason for that is that I think by the time we recorded, we had told my parents that we were having another baby, but we hadn't told yours. We actually waited until we went to Hawaii and told them in person. And I was almost 20 weeks pregnant by that point. So showing all the things, obviously, you know, all the neighbors and friends here knew and stuff like that. But we didn't want to let that news slip in like a personal internet way before our families knew. And so when we got back from January, we had our anatomy scan. We made sure baby girl was all good. We confirmed that she was a girl, all that type of stuff. And then we announced kind of with kind of our bigger circle, but we still just didn't really talk about it on the podcast. It just didn't feel like, I guess we just didn't have an episode to share about it. And it's been interesting because the start of this year has been very family focused. As you guys have heard, we've done 2 very, you know, G-rated kind of domestic trips, one with your family, one with my family. And that's been really nice. And then obviously we've got baby coming. So we're not going to be traveling a ton in the next couple of months. We're planning to go back to Canada later in the summer. And then, you know, hopefully we'll maybe do something a little bit closer to home, maybe like a beach destination in Mexico or something like that in the fall. But really just going to be settling into having a toddler and a newborn over the next couple months.
Yeah, so we're going to do a bit of a pause on the podcast. So this will be the last episode for a bit. And then really try to like figure out what does life and travel look like as a family of 4. So we did a few trips in the first year with our first daughter. And then in her second year, we kind of went out, did everything last year. And so I think we'll probably follow a similar rhythm or maybe not much travel for the next 12 or so months. And then kind of diving back into more trips to take advantage of that under 2, don't buy a plane ticket situation.
Yeah, finding the balance of like, I don't know, the first year with Lou was really, I mean, it was like huge growth for us. I think just stepping into parenthood and learning to manage all of that. But it was just a lot. I mean, we were very, very tired. And so I honestly didn't feel like a huge call to do a bunch of big travels. Like little travels were nice. And it was nice to get her accustomed to road trips and get her on flights and stuff like that. So we did do some stuff. But I feel like once we kind of hit like almost that 1 year mark of parenting, it was like, okay, we got 1 more year of free flights. Like, let's do this. Like, I feel like, you know, we kind of know what we're doing a little bit and we kind of feel like we're a bit more settled. We've got like some stable ground under our feet. Let's like get out as much as we can, which was very much 2023. So we had so much content for last year and now we're kind of going back into a little bit of a nesting, not traveling as much for the next little bit type of mode. So yeah, like Rand said, we've decided to take a little pause from the podcast. We don't have any like structured plans or anything. So we will just keep you guys posted both on social media and via email and via the podcast and stuff. I'm sure we'll be back with content at some point, but I think at this point we're just focusing on this next chapter and getting settled in with that. And once we are back out doing some more adventures, then I'm sure there'll be more content. Yeah, so definitely stay in touch with us on social media. Stay subscribed, and a new episode will hit your inbox in a couple months. And that's, I think, the biggest thing. Anything else you want to add? No, I don't think so. Just wanted to, update everyone and say thank you to everyone who's been listening over the last couple of months. We've really enjoyed the interviews that we've got to put out so far this year in 2024. And, we've enjoyed the trips that we've taken. And now, at least for me, I'm really ready to just be nesting and stepping into this next chapter, and excited to be taking a little pause and, just having some family time, really. Yeah. So thank you for listening. Stay in touch on social media, and we will see you later on this year. Yeah. Thanks, guys.